Look around your room right now. Notice how quiet it is. That hum from your fridge, the light from your phone, the fact that you know exactly where you are and exactly what day it is. Hold on to that feeling. Because in the summer of 1587, there were 115 people standing on a strip of sand off the coast of what's now North Carolina, and they didn't have that. They had nothing. No idea what day it was back in England. No idea if anyone was coming back for them. Just an island, some trees, and a governor named John White who made a promise he couldn't keep. He said he'd be back in 3 months. 3 months turned into 3 years. Picture that. Every single morning, waking up and walking to the same stretch of beach, scanning the same horizon and seeing nothing. Day 1, that's just waiting. Day 300, that's something else. That's your brain starting to unravel in a different way, wondering if the world back home even remembers you exist. And here's the part that should mess with you a little. Somewhere in that gap between waiting and disappearing, every single one of them stopped existing on paper. No records, no graves, no bodies, just gone. And we still don't fully know what happened in that silence. So when White finally makes it back in 1590, he's not walking into a rescue mission, he's walking into a crime scene. And here's where you gotta start thinking like an investigator, not a tourist. Because the first thing that's weird is what's missing. The houses are still standing, not burned, not smashed, taken apart, board by board, like someone had time, like someone planned it. You don't dismantle your own home in a panic. You do that when you're moving somewhere on purpose. Next thing, the heavy stuff is gone. Armor, ship parts, tools too big to carry easily, all gone missing, except for a few pieces buried like someone meant to come back for them later. That's not abandonment. That's storage. That's a group of people who knew exactly what they were doing and where they were going. And then there's the word, carved into a post, 9 letters, Croatoan. No cross above it, no distress symbol, nothing screaming for help. White himself had given them a code before he left. Carve a cross if you're in danger. There's no cross, which means technically, by their own agreed-upon signal, these people were fine. They just weren't there anymore. Sit with that for a second. 115 people vanish, and the only clue they leave behind is basically a note that says, "Don't worry about us." But here's the loop this keeps circling back to. If they weren't in danger, why does history remember this as a tragedy instead of a relocation? Why do we call it lost instead of moved? That question right there is where it starts getting genuinely disturbing. Because once you start pulling at the edges of this story, you find stuff that never makes it into the textbook version. Spanish records from that same era mention English settlers spotted living among coastal tribes years after Roanoke was supposedly a ghost town. Some of these accounts describe blue-eyed people speaking a mix of English and Algonquian, living inland generations later. That's not a ghost story. That's a paper trail history, basically decided to ignore. Then there's the map. The actual original map John White drew of the region had a patch on it, a piece of paper glued over one specific section. For centuries, nobody thought much of it. Then modern imaging tech gets pointed at it, and underneath that patch is a symbol, a fort, hidden, deliberately covered up on a map made by the one guy who actually knew these people. Why hide a location unless you're worried about who might come looking for it? Spanish raiders were actively hunting English colonies up and down that coast at the time. Covering that fort might not be a mystery, it might have been protection. And this is where the theory gets genuinely cold. What if Roanoke didn't disappear because of some tragedy at all? What if it disappeared because it succeeded at doing exactly what it wasn't supposed to do? Integrate, survive. Blend into a world that colonial history had no interest in acknowledging, because a story where English settlers just quietly joined native communities and lived doesn't fit the narrative that got taught for the next 400 years. Erasure isn't always violent. Sometimes it's just inconvenient, and inconvenient stories get buried under a patch on a map, or a line in a Spanish log nobody bothered translating for a couple hundred years. Now here's where it comes back to you. Sitting there, screen lighting up your face in a dark room, probably later at night than you'd admit. Think about how much of your life exists on paper right now. Your name in a database somewhere. A digital trail of every place you've been. Everything you've bought. Every message you've sent. You probably think that makes you the opposite of those 115 people. Permanent, documented, impossible to lose, but records fail, systems get replaced, servers get wiped, companies fold, and their data goes with them. 400 years from now, when the platforms holding your entire digital footprint don't exist anymore, how much of you is actually left behind? A name in some archive nobody's checked in decades, a username with no context, floating in a database nobody bothers to open. That's the real gut punch buried in this story. It was never really about a colony on an island in 1587. It's about how easily 115 fully real, fully alive people can be reduced to a single word carved into a post, and a question mark that's followed us for 4 centuries. Your entire existence, everything you think is permanent right now, is one dismantled system away from being someone else's cold case. So go ahead, look around your room again. It's quiet in here too.